Hi, it's Haley, author of the Fast Metabolism Diet. The other day on Facebook, we wanted to know what questions would you like to ask me. Overwhelmingly, you guys wanted me to weigh in on how does menopause affect the metabolism? What happens when we have menopause-based weight gain or hormone-based weight loss resistance? And there's a couple of things that I wanted to touch base with. I don't want to necessarily give you a lecture on, what is menopause and estrogens and progesterones, but I want to make sure that you look at ways and ideas and suggestions of how you can enhance your metabolism when you're going through this very difficult or at times difficult transition hormonally in your body. Let's dissect it down a little bit and talk about the 3 different phases on the fast metabolism diet and how those relate to your metabolism, and layer on top of it what makes it a unique situation when you're going through peri-menopause, menopause, or even post-menopause. First, in phase 1, let's talk a little bit about the adrenal glands. As we've talked, the adrenal glands regulate a lot of different stress hormones. They're also responsible for regulating how the body stores and burns sugars. Does it store it in the liver or in the muscle as glycogen? Does it burn it quickly for fuel or energy? Or do stress-based hormones like cortisol cause the body to store adrenal-based hormones or sugars as fats? One thing that menopause kind of puts a unique twist on this, and that a lot of people maybe don't realize, and sometimes I even forget, is that the body manufactures cortisol, that kind of hormone that we talk a lot about when we talk about belly fat or weight gain. It actually manufactures cortisol from progesterone. And in menopause, women's ovaries become less and less efficient at producing both estrogens and progesterones. But progesterones are really needed for the body to be able to back convert to balance for the estrogens that the ovaries aren't producing. If this doesn't happen real efficiently, for example, if the progesterone is being more converted into cortisol as opposed to being back converted or remodeled, if you will, into estrogens as the ovaries become more dormant, then another part of the body has to compensate. And typically what happens, compensation, is the fat cells and the adrenal glands actually can produce another type or a form of estrogen. This type of estrogen is really hard to be metabolized by the liver, therefore oftentimes having to be stored in fat cells, and actually excitation or proliferation of the fat cells occurs because the body's trying to keep up with the hormone production and the hormone balance. So we're going to go in, so I hope that helps a little bit. With menopause, it's extra important to make sure that we utilize phytonutrients or plant-based nutrients so that the body, that kind of mimic estrogenic effects. Things like blueberries are very high in resveratrol. Resveratrol is really, a lot of you have maybe heard there's a great Eleanor Rogan, she's a PhD at Johns Hopkins University. Her stuff's amazing to read about resveratrol's effect on estrogens and how the body utilizes and tries to compensate for the ovaries producing less estrogen during menopause. I like a lot of her stuff. Pomegranates are another one that are really great. Also, making sure that you're, like when you're on phase 1, if you're going through menopause, making sure that you're doing a lot of the stress reduction techniques. Maybe adding fruit right before your exercise so that your body has enough healthy sugars to not evoke the stress hormones while you're doing your cardiovascular. Also making sure that you're staying in that sweet spot where your body's getting enough cardiovascular to increase blood flow into the fatty areas of the body, but don't stress it out too much so that the body elevates cortisol. So I always say try to keep your heart rate around 125, 135. When you get up above 145, the body has a tendency to produce more stress hormones. So as you're going through menopause, perimenopause, even postmenopause, make sure that you're checking that heart rate and you're staying at a sustained level so that you're evoking healthy heart health, cardiovascular health without evoking the stress hormones. When we talk about phase 2, I want to layer on the unique issues that menopause bring on. We talk about the liver specifically. So the liver cleaves hormones from what our tissues produce, whether that's the ovaries, the fat cells of the adrenal glands, when we talk about estrogen. The liver converts those into bioactive or estrogens that are able to be metabolized. The liver also produces a hormone that's called sex-binding hormone globulin, and it produces that to bind with, like the way I always think of it is estrogen can travel solo in your bloodstream, or it can carpool or travel with a protein called sex-binding hormone globulin. The liver will produce sex-binding hormone globulin when the body can't metabolize all the estrogen that's being produced, again, either by your ovaries, your adrenals, your fat cells. It'll produce this other protein in the liver in order to kind of bind that excess and hopefully shuttle it out or prevent it from causing problems. What happens though is that non-bioavailable, non-free floating estrogen doesn't really signal the fat cells. In fact, it actually kind of gums up the receptor site so that the fat cells don't believe that there's enough estrogen on board, and it proliferates or produces more. So the liver plays a really important role, because if it's metabolizing estrogen efficiently, then your body will have just enough to keep, you know, the hair, the skin, the nails, the collagen, and elastin, but not too much that it creates fat proliferation or fat storage. So when we talk about the liver and we talk about phase 2 specifically, phytonutrients in cruciferous vegetables, the vegetables that cross over, that's how I always remember the cruciferous vegetables, the cabbages, the asparagus, the Brussels sprouts, those contain particular phytonutrients that really help the body metabolize estrogen, what it has, so that the excess estrogen doesn't get gummed up, the receptor sites the brain doesn't get notified that it has enough estrogen, and the body continues to signal the proliferation of estrogen from the adrenals and from the fat cells. So really important in phase 2 that you get a lot of the cruciferous vegetables. But the other thing is, what the body does once it's bound that excess estrogen is it tries to excrete it through the colon. And so having a lot of fiber helps wash away that excess non-utilizable, non-metabolized estrogen. So it's why I'm always after you guys to make sure that you get fiber, or lots and lots of vegetables in phase 2. Also, pH reduces inflammation. There's this whole stuff about prostaglandins, but inflammation inhibits estrogen metabolism really efficiently. So really being diligent about that. The other thing when we talk about exercise and we're laying menopause on there, we want to talk about when we're doing weights, low repetitions but very heavy weights. I always tell individuals that you should be able to do 10 reps, 8 reps, and then 6 reps. If you're able to do more or carry on a conversation during those and you're not really struggling and you're very angry with me for how heavy I'm making do the weights, you're not causing that micro trauma in the muscle that stimulates the hormones of metabolism for tissue repair. That's especially important when you're going through menopause. Phase 3, we'll talk a little bit about how menopause layers this really sticky, this extra layer of complexity, is that phase 3 is all about, we talk about turning up the heat, but it's all about creating hormone and hormone production by the micronutrients, the phytonutrients in the healthy fats. The body then manufactures the sex hormones from those. Manufactures cholesterol, the body can convert estrogens, progesterones. But when you're in a body that the estrogen production is starting to become lower and lower with the ovaries, the fat cells in the adrenals are compensating, and then let's jump back up to phase 1 again, maybe stress hormones are actually consuming your progesterone and turning it into cortisol, phase 3 can get a little bit tricky. So things that you want to think about in phase 3 is making sure that you have lots of the phytoestrogens, non-soy based, like let's say flax is phenomenal. So making sure you're using flaxseed or flaxseed oil is great if you're dealing with menopause and perimenopause symptoms and you're going through the fast metabolism diet. The other thing that's I would say super important is doing stress reduction techniques like deep breathing, making sure you get that massage in, but also looking at really listening to your body, looking at your labs, and seeing I guess the way to describe this is a lot of people, they pull their bloods and they see their E2 levels or their estradiol levels are low. They're going through menopause. They have low levels of estrogen. If you're having, vaginal dryness, night sweats, but not having weight gain, then a lot of times the body truly is expressing an estrogen deficiency. One of the things that I find in the clinic, though, is individuals that have a lot of edema, breast tenderness, swelly, puffy, a lot of that really soft, fatty tissue, aggressive weight gain. They actually are exhibiting signs of excess estrogen. So not necessarily are their blood levels of E2 or estradiol high, but their body's not able to metabolize estrogen efficiently. So important. Things that we look at are all the herbs and spices, things like turmeric, black pepper, making sure you're using lots of cardamom, cinnamon, making sure that you're dry skin brushing because that stimulates lymphatic detox, lymphatic drainage, detox, also collagen and elastin production. And the other thing, again, when you're kind of layering in phase 3, and we're talking about the hormones, is there's these other category of hormones which exist outside of our body, what we call them xenohormones, or basically they're chemicals, insecticides, pesticides, and plastics that act estrogen-like or hormone-like in our bodies. So especially in phase 3, do organic as much as possible. Higher up the food chain, the more important. So I know we're not doing dairy on the fast metabolism diet, but definitely eggs, higher fat foods like, you know, your nuts and seeds. If you can go in that direction, it's so important. Again, if you're layering that complexity of menopause into the metabolism. The other thing to think about is any kind of detox techniques. Some people like to do things like castor oil packs. You guys know I'm a huge supplement advocate, especially when there's an imbalance or the body's having a difficult time going through that transition. Products like DIM seem to be really good in helping to wash the receptor sites. There's there's a lot of great studies on resveratrol and menopause-based weight gain, but resveratrol, don't think I'm trying to talk you guys into doing red wine on the fast metabolism diet, but don't forget things like pomegranate, blueberries. Oats are also very good in helping balance estrogens and phytoestrogens, so make sure if you're not doing oatmeal that maybe you're doing that on the fast metabolism diet. But again, isn't it ironic that it matches the three phases of the fast metabolism diet? Things that we want to look at with menopause is adrenals, making sure that we're doing stress reduction techniques and that our body has enough broad, biodiverse micronutrients to help adjust and regulate all the changes. Liver. That's where the body metabolizes estrogens, progesterones, manufactures a sex-binding hormone, globulin, making sure that you're really nurturing that, but that there's enough fiber in phase 2, that there's enough alkaline vegetables in phase 2, and really focusing on the cruciferous vegetables. And then in phase 3, maybe consider doing a flax-based support. It acts as a phytoestrogen, not in the same way that soy does. It's actually anti-inflammatory and more nurturing to the thyroid. Maybe considering adding that into your phase 3. And stress reduction techniques, dry skin brushing, stimulate. You want to make sure that you can do any of the loofing, anything to increase vasodilation or blood flow into the fat cells. Sleep is so important. I read this really cool study, and I want to reiterate why I always try to get you guys to make sure that you have breakfast within 30 minutes of waking, that if you support and nurture the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and the sympathetic tones when you wake in the morning by eating, that it actually helps you sleep deeper in the evening when the parasympathetic tones are in more overdrive. And it was really cool because I was reading this neat study on how sleep affects the metabolism. It definitely slows the metabolism, but it also advances and progresses age. So as we're going through these transitions, look at making sure that you're layering that complexity of your life in your world and what's going on in your body, and we're looking at those specific nutrients. We'll create a blog around this to give you kind of some tangible ideas, but menopause definitely affects the metabolism. All the more reason why you're going through that transition to be nurturing the adrenals, the liver, and the very things that regulate and stimulate hormone and hormone production. Thanks.